if the local governments attracted or established a framework for which the maritime powerhouses in the U.S., and I'm thinking Matson, APL, Crowley, and there's a number of others, right? To set up shop here on the CNMI on Guam, where they're hardly paying any taxes, that would be a huge benefit. So virtually, the CNMI or Guam could then become the U.S. flag of convenience, still under the U.S. flag, but structured in such a way that it's they're here. That's going to
Yes,
bring headquarters right here or right to Guam. That's going to bring all of a lot of stuff, the logistics, the computer people, all of that stuff that requires the underpinnings of the headquarters of a company to be to be right here.
Off a day. It's your innovation coach, Rob Jackson, and welcome to another edition of the Innovate Guam Podcast, the podcast where we explore all things innovation, technology, and improvement related to the island of Guam. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow me on YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and Substack. My podcasts drop at the beginning of each week. Also, be sure to check out my Innovate column in the Pacific Daily News every first and third Friday of the month. Today's guest is Captain Michael W. Bacher, a retired U.S. Navy captain, a U.S. Merchant Marine Master Mariner, and the founder and executive director of the Western Pacific Maritime Academy, also known as WPMA. Captain Bacher's story is global and it's uniquely aligned with the Western Pacific. He calls Saipan home and he's been rooted in the CNMI since 2014, drawn in by the region's vast beauty, culture, and strategic significance. But his journey started far from here. He was born in Switzerland, raised across Colombia and Germany, and later in Virginia, before joining the Navy in 1979 as a quartermaster specializing in navigation. Over a career spanning more than 4 decades across the Navy, the Merchant Marine, offshore operations, and maritime education, he served aboard major vessels, earned elite maritime credentials, taught navigation at a maritime academy, and built a deep understanding of what it takes to produce competent, credentialed, safety first mariners who can thrive in demanding real world conditions. In retirement, Captain Bacher took that lifetime of experience and turned it into mission, founding WPMA to train and place mariners from the CNMI, Guam, and the broader Pacific into in demand careers locally, nationally, and internationally. WPMA isn't just about education, it's about pipeline and a path to a high wage, high purpose career for young people across Micronesia and the Western Pacific. Captain Bacher, half a day, and welcome to the Innovate Guam podcast.
Thank you very much for inviting me to the podcast. I'm really looking forward to our conversation and all the topics and where they might lead.
All right, today's episode is about maritime workforce, regional opportunity, and national strategy, all colliding right here in the Western Pacific. Because when people talk about the tip of the spear in great power competition, they're talking about our region, Guam, CNMI, and our Micronesian neighbors. And here's the thing: you can't talk national security, trade, shipbuilding, or sustainment in the Indo Pacific theater without talking about the sea. Maritime isn't a side story, it is the main road. That's why the White House's recent push for maritime strength and the broader maritime action plan conversation matters so much for island communities like our own. And it's why I wanted to bring on someone who isn't just talking about maritime workforce development, he's actually building it right now, right here, through an academy designed to train and place the next generation of mariners across the Western Pacific. All right, Captain Bacher. Um, you know, we have a tradition here on the podcast. We start off with a couple of icebreaker questions to kind of get a sense of where your head is at in terms of innovation. And the first question that I ask all my guests is, what is your definition of innovation and what does innovation mean to you?
Yes, well, Robert, I think this is a really great question and a great way to start. And innovation is doing something that nobody has done before. I think that's probably the most succinct definition of what innovation is. And Western Pacific Maritime Academy is playing in space that is not traditional for maritime schools. I would say that we are probably one of two schools in the country that focus their efforts on workforce placement. And in our case, you rightfully said we train the next generation of mariners. We'll have a chance to talk a lot more about that, but we are the only school that is uh, focusing on placing people into the workforce of all ages and doing so through outstanding maritime training and programs that are very, very specifically designed to that end.
Outstanding. So you serve both in the military and commercial maritime worlds. What's a moment at sea, here, insert good sea story, good or hard, that permanently changed your leadership style in the maritime environment?
Well, this is a story that I like to repeat often, and I do so in many different contexts. When I was 18 years old and joined the Navy, I enlisted into the Navy in 1979 and was at my first command and was working for a supervisor who, in the end, proved himself to be not very knowledgeable and also not a good leader. And so the C story is this, is that his leadership style revolved around a key ring. And the
Mm,
key ring had one key for each one of the spaces that us underlings needed to access. So if you wanted to go to get a pencil, you had to go to this supervisor, get the key off his key
mm,
ring, go to the
mm.
pencil locker, grab your pencil, come back for returning the keys, and now you have a pencil. And and time passed, and this was for everything. So this was for getting the wax, for buffing the floors, or you name it, whatever maintenance, the grease for greasing the equipment, whatever. And and I found this method of leadership to be very controlling, very um, there's a word for this, but very nitpicky and very
Micromanaging.
micromanaging. That's the word I was looking for. Very nitpicky, very inefficient. Because literally, if this particular supervisor were not around, if he was off the ship or something, you just couldn't get anything done. We were blocked out of being able to work. Anyway, many years later, on the same ship, this was the USS Spruance, and so this would have been probably somewhere around 1984. I raised my ranks as an enlisted man in the Navy, and I eventually became the supervisor. And what I did with that key ring is I took all of the keys and cast them away and made um, master keys for each one of the areas of our spaces, and handed those master keys out to all of the all of the folks who worked for me. And what that did was, of course, enable them to go and get their own pencil without bothering me, and get their own
Empowerment.
rights without bothering me, and let people just do their job. And so that leadership style persists even to this day in the management of the wonderful staff and leadership that we have in our office at WPMA, and it has served me very, very well through the years. So the trick is, I think, in leadership is to enable your people to do their jobs and not to get into their way. Because you know what? A lot of times those people are going to be much better at doing their job than you than you possibly ever were.
That's right.
So I love that
That's right.
story, and I'll probably be saying it to my grandkids or great grandkids as I'm one foot in the grave sometime to the future.
Yeah, that's a great story about empowerment. All right, next question. And again, if you don't notice a theme here, I'm fishing for sea stories, right? So if you could take every teenager in Guam and the CNMI on a 1 hour sea story ride to spark their imagination, what would you show them and what would you want them to feel walking off of that boat after spending time with you?
So let me work backwards into that and say that one of the beautiful things about being on a ship is standing watch on the bridge and watching the horizon. The horizon is endless.
Mm,
And having an endless horizon for me has always represented a number of different things. One, it's endless opportunities. Another, it's adventures that are down the road that you can't see. So this is really not, or even envision or even predict. So this is really not so much of a sea story rather than a philosophy of of what the opportunities are that WPMA, Western Pacific Maritime Academy, offers. One of the things that we sell, um, I would say, is really the fulfillment of dreams, which is a very lofty thing. So you might go to the website and say, "Oh, well, this is a company that an NGO that does training, or this is an NGO that puts people to work," but really it's a lot more than that. And so in my conversations with the young people, and I'll give you an example, we're talking to two high schools together in a seminar this evening, or I should say I am. And what I tell these people is these young people, and young people here, Western as Pacific Islanders, or in the hills of Appalachia or in Orange County, Virginia, where I grew up, is really all the same. It's really about selling an opportunity. And that's what we do. So we don't guarantee that somebody's going to get a job. We do guarantee that they're going to get excellent training. And we do guarantee that if they push themselves hard enough, they will be on that same bridge that I was when I was 18 years old as a junior enlisted Navy man with an endless horizon, meaning endless possibilities ahead. And there was no way that I could have predicted 45 years ago that I'd be here on Saipan, uh, being at the tip of the spear of a maritime school that may very well go onto the national stage as a force to be reckoned with, being that we're the only company that's doing exactly what we're doing. So um, yeah, there's adventure involved with going to sea. They're seeing cultures that you might have never seen before. There's meeting people of different colors and different backgrounds and races and religions and all of that stuff. And essentially the myopic world that a CNMI or Guam kid who has never stepped off the island will all of a sudden open up, that there's another world out there, this huge world.
yes.
And we've all heard of the saying, the world is your oyster. And this is particularly true if you're a mariner. Now, what is the opportunity that this industry offers? Well, somebody coming out of school could, if they work hard enough and get a job, start out with a paycheck of, six, seven, 800, sorry, $100,000 a month, right? Which now all of a sudden to an 18-year-old who would be making more than their high school counselor or even principal is all of a sudden a real thing. So what does that mean? That means, okay, now I can build a family. Now I've got a pathway to buying a
Yes.
house and making my life better and building wealth and creating something, a legacy that could be passed on to their own children. And this is a theme that we see here, is particularly at the high school level on the CNMI, over and over and over again, that folks are stuck, right? There's no
Yes.
path out. And so this then
Yes.
all of a sudden becomes a path.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. All right, so let's now get into the meat of our podcast as episode, and let's start off by getting a sense of who is Michael Bacher, kind of where you come from, and background and stuff. So you've lived a very international life. You were born in Switzerland, raised across multiple countries, and then a long career in maritime service, both in the military and the commercial realm. How did that global upbringing shape your worldview, and why did the Western Pacific become home to you, uh, to basically put down root here?
Yeah, so those are really big questions. And forgive me if I bloviate for a bit longer than you would like, because it really speaks to a big part of who I am. To the first part of your question, being a mariner, well, first of all, having grown up in Switzerland and lived in South America, in Colombia and Germany, and then on a farm in the central Virginia, uh, does something that to the mind that says that the world is much bigger than what you would otherwise imagine. Now, as an
Right.
example, in Orange County, Virginia, in high school, junior high school and high school, there were kids who had never stepped out of their corner of the county, maybe had never even stepped out of the county, right? And so having come from a place where all of a sudden the world is your county really opens up the door to understanding that there's a lot more going on. Now I can just very easily translate that experience to young men and young boys and girls and men and women on Guam, Saipan, FSM and Palau, Ponape, wherever. And that is that their whole world revolves around the little home that they grew up in and never lived in anywhere else, their immediate family that they have, whereas my immediate family was in Austria and Switzerland and Scotland and other places, right? That was my
Yeah.
immediate family, my grandparents, for example, in Austria. And so the whole world view of what's out there is markedly different. I even compared that to my son, who grew up in Annapolis, Virginia, and Annapolis, Maryland, and basically still stays there. But he is also a mariner and also is a man of the world. Now, the um, the second part of the question, which I think in some ways is a little bit more interesting, is how did I land on Saipan? And that is
Yes.
the immediate answer to that is that I was assigned as captain on a ship that was at anchor here. It was one of the military Sea Lift Command LMSRs that was painted, had the gray hull, not the black hull, and
Yes.
um, and we were here at anchor here right off of Saipan. So I, got onto United Flight by the company, and I took over this ship and was here. Now, my tenure with the company really didn't last that long. It was a couple years as captain for the company, but my heart landed solidly in Saipan, and there's a couple of reasons
Mm,
for why that is. Number one is respect for the culture. I very quickly
mm,
became quite close to a number of Pacific Islanders, mostly Carolinian, but some Chamorro people, and there's something about the worldview of the Pacific Islanders that I really much identify with, and that is a seafaring legacy. So there's something very impactful about that and something that I connected with. So that's number one. Number two is that my wife is from Indonesia, and this place strategically in the world was close enough for us to go to Indonesia and kind of like stay in this part of the world. And a lot of my career as a mariner was, at least in the second half, you could say, was centered around the Western Pacific. So Japan, Korea, Singapore, Philippines, Indonesia, that sort of stuff. So it was geographically in a very good place. And I would say the third thing is, and this has to go back to my early years in high school, in middle school, I should say, is that one of the papers that I did in the social studies course was a book report on a vessel called the Kontiki. Now, the Kontiki, the canoe Kontiki was built somewhere in Polynesia. I don't remember, maybe Hawaii, and it was a straw canoe, and it was entirely um, designed and rebuilt in what was understood then to be traditional forms, which is different than the canoes made out of the logs here, to prove that the Polynesians could have traded to the Americas directly, rather than the theory of coming across the land bridge in between Russia and Alaska.
Ah,
And
yeah, okay.
yeah, and so if you do just a little bit of whatever Google research, you'll see about the Kontiki, and that story never left me. The details of it, of course, did, because I'm old and don't remember squat. Um, but the adventure and the broader idea of proving that Pacific Islanders were a people who traded over vast oceans. That's the part of it that stayed with me. And when I connected with people like Lino Olapai and Cecilio, Master Navigator Cecilio, and Master Navigator uh, Tony, who works down at CTA Academy down in Agate, and the folks down at the canoe house, the Carolinian and Chamorro canoe house here in the scene here on Saipan, and other people, Master Navigator Mario. So those connections were very important to ideas that were formulated in my mind, at the very beginning of my life of knowledge. So I would say those three things.
Yeah, yeah. All right. So let's now talk about purpose. You know, what was the major problem you were trying to solve when you founded the Western Pacific Maritime Academy?
Well, when Captain Dave and I first started working on the concept of WPMA, and it was kind of a back of a napkin kind of a thing. We're never going to be the apples of the world or anything like that. It's much more personal. We didn't think about purpose and problem solving in a very big scale. It was actually much smaller, and that is that we had a relationship with Cabris and a company that they had associated with, which was Mid Atlantic Maritime Academy, and through a set of circumstances which goes beyond this particular conversation, those um, those relationships sort of like broke down. Here on Saipan, there used to be a school, a maritime school run by somebody else, and that somebody else, abandoned the school and moved to Hawaii, and eventually that sort of fell apart. So we recognized that there was an opportunity to be filled. Now, what we did not envision at that point, because frankly we're just trying to get a school up and to see if it would work. What we did not envision is that WPMA would be in a position to possibly enter into the national stage. It was much simpler. It was two old guys who had spent most of their career at sea, and now we're in the retirement phase of life. And what's the next thing that we do with our lives that's meaningful? And can we develop something that has some kind of uh, foundational business aspect to it that could make it survive for more than just the starting phase.
Yeah,
And it has progressed from there.
yeah. Well, that's a great segue into kind of the next um, segment area, and that's kind of really the Western Pacific Maritime Academy story. So, for people hearing WPMA for the first time, what is it, and what is your mission in one sentence?
So our mission statement is right there on our website, and it's training the next generation of mariners. So as the school and the concept of the school, the academy, began to formulate, and after I started submitting a few courses that we could actually teach on, which that process is not for the faint of heart either. And we had a product, and we then established a relationship for a pilot program with the CNMI public school system, and then eventually with the Department of Labor, and then out from that uh, from those beginnings, then we all of a sudden fell into a business plan, you could say, or something that would keep us expanding from a concept to a real business. Remind me your question again, because I strayed off just a bit.
Yeah, so I wanted to get an idea what was the mission statement
Oh yeah,
in
the
one
mission.
sentence, and you gave that. So um, I'm going to lead you on to the next question because I think this is where you're going. If you could kind of walk us through kind of the footprint, where's WPMA operating today? Because I understand you have footprint both on Saipan and Guam, and where are you looking at trying to expand across the Pacific for the
Mm.
future?
Well, there's a reason fundamentally why Western Pacific Maritime Academy was called Western Pacific Maritime Academy, because we didn't want to be Micronesia Maritime Academy. We didn't want to be Guam Maritime Academy, CNMI Maritime Academy, Saipan. We wanted
That
to
vision
make,
was already in there in your head from the beginning.
from the very beginning, we wanted to spread joy across the entire Pacific. And so there's another little piece of the story which will help kind of define that, and that is that before I signed the dotted lines on corporate papers, I needed to in a very deliberate fashion identify solutions uh, for three pillars uh, that underpinned even getting us off the ground. So those three pillars were identifying curriculum, identifying instructors, and identifying uh, um, an audience or a client base. So for the instructors, it was myself, Captain Dave, and a couple others, and so that was already there. For curriculum, in previous times, I had taught at MITAGS, which is the educational arm of the Master Mates and Pilots, the union that I served in as a deck officer, and I had a very good relationship with the executive director there, a guy by the name of Glenn Payne, and who replaced him eventually, Eric Friend, and so we identified curriculum, and that was probably the hardest and most important thing, simply because developing curriculum from scratch is not something that there's not enough days in my life left to do that, right? So we had to have kind of a ready product that we needed to just rebrand and submit to Coast Guard for approval. So getting a school up and running is really quite a difficult thing, as I learned along the way. Um, so those three things were satisfied. We partnered with 500 Sales here on the CNMI and ran what do you call it? A poll, not a poll, but a survey in the high school, and we had a very, very good response from, I don't know, maybe less than 10, maybe 5% of the candidates who answered the poll or the survey responded very favorably. And so we interpreted that, 500 Sales and I interpreted that as a green light to proceed. The relationship with 500 Sales didn't persist, and that's okay. We really do work in a very different a corner of the maritime world, um, insofar as partnering for teaching to PSS, but um, uh, it ended up being that both of us, for our independent reasons, used that survey for our own purposes, and so thereby, we made the decision to proceed and then invested mostly in sweat equity. There's very little investment money that went into the company. It was mostly time, and then we grew it to where we are now. Now, I mentioned my tags deliberately, and that is because in our agreement, in our licensing agreement, we are prohibited from expanding into the lower 48, what we call CONUS, the continental United
Okay.
States. And that's fine because that was really never part of our goal. And
Right.
so and so where we look to eventually having a footprint, to answer your question more directly, is CNMI, Guam, all the COFA states, and there's particularly challenges there, which we'll talk about later. Hawaii, American Samoa, Alaska, Puerto Rico, and the Virgin Islands.
Mm,
So,
mm.
and so we have very strong inroads on Hawaii already. We are not established there. We're going to start by submitting what do you call it, an ETPL, eligible training provider list to the Hawaii Department of Labor, and that process looks like it's going to be quite simple. Um, and and we're actively networking now with people in Hawaii who will help us in that expansion. And very specifically, we have brought on two additional trustees who are very well regarded in Hawaii. One is Michael. Uh, I'm skipping on names. But anyway, two very prominent people in Hawaii who are in the maritime industry. So one is a pilot, and one is in industry as the leader, I guess, of the company that has the largest inter-island presence in tugs and barges and towing vessels and push boats and water taxis and so on. So what we're doing now is we're just setting the foundation for our expansion to Hawaii, because Hawaii is going to be a very complicated place to expand to. Just to give you an
Yeah.
example, there's already another school there. There is and it's Maritime Institute. We've got a very good relationship with them. In fact, we're going to be entering into a cooperative agreement, or at least a proposal that will make our entry a little bit easier. Our independent missions are aligned, but we will be in a competitive space a little bit, but not really, because they're not interested in dealing with the headaches of working with DOL. And then once we're there, then it's going to be an easy jump over to American Samoa, and we're already starting the process of um, of communicating with interested parties in Puerto Rico and Alaska. So
Okay.
um, it
That's a great overview of kind of your vision for the expansion plan. But a follow-up question. Today, as the footprint sits, you have like a main campus headquartered in Saipan, and then you have kind of a smaller satellite operation in Guam. Or can you kind of define what the footprint looks like today?
Sure. So our model is, and this is just to keep costs uh, down and controlled. Our model is to partner with existing trade schools wherever we go, right? So on Guam, you have this wonderful school called GCA Trades, led by Dr.
Dr. Bert
Bert
Johnston.
Johnson. Yeah,
Yeah.
and he is extremely well regarded and well connected on Guam, and so we're capitalizing on all of his relationships on Guam. In Hawaii, this is proving to be just a little bit tricky, but there's a trade association very similar to GCA, Guam Contractors Association, called ABC Hawaii, and they have a classroom, and they are the only non-union trade association. So we're hoping, we don't have anything signed, but we're working that relationship, and hopefully that will will kind of give us a little bit of a footprint from which to work in the same way that GCA Trades has opened their arms and welcomed us in with a cubicle, and it's not free, and use of the classrooms, and that's not free either. But that's a lot cheaper than brick and mortar. Um,
Absolutely.
and
Absolutely.
yeah, so that's our model. And as we, for example, spread out to American Samoa, there's a trade school there that we're courting, and we haven't really done too much research in Alaska yet, but we've identified a couple of trade schools in Puerto Rico, in Ponce and in San Juan that might be interested in working with us.
Yeah, I like that model of partnership and collaboration, uh, rather than trying to reinvent the wheel or kind of go it your own kind of way. I think there's a power in collaboration there, so that's great. Let's talk about students now. Who are your typical trainees, like age ranges, where are they from, more CNMI, Guam, Micronesia kind of folks, or other places? And are they like first-time job seekers, or are they people changing careers, or are they like veterans even coming out of the Navy and now wanting to pursue this in the commercial? What does that demographic of students look like? Go to WPMA.
Okay, sure. I before I go to that question, I do want to follow up with another point about our expansion plans, and more specifically about the costs associated with that, because uh, running a maritime school is very, very expensive, a lot more expensive than I had envisioned in the beginning. We got our start financially in large measure to an ARPA grant that was awarded to us by the CNMI governor at the time, and largely spearheaded by Will Castro, who is now the principal then at CTA. So we owe him a huge debt of gratitude. But that first $100,000, and it was not a huge grant, but it was enough to make a difference for us. That funded a simulator, and that funded books and SCBAs and things that are hugely expensive. So it took us a while to kind of build that, and then we started using our partnerships here in the CNMI with ARF and the fire department to provide firefighting training, which we'll talk about curriculum later on. But eventually, we had the money where we could build our own fire trainers. So, as an example, we have built now two fire trainers on Guam, one that we shipped up here to the CNMI, and each one of the fire trainers, when you look at the cost of the trainer itself, transportation, the fire suits, the SCBAs, all of that stuff, and then all of duplicating the resources, the books, the materials, the everything, the computers and so on, it becomes expensive. So the fire trainer investment with all of the associated gear was probably about 30, maybe $40,000. And the simulator, so it's a full mission bridge simulator that's got, big, huge screens. That right there was almost 40,000 by itself, and we intend to duplicate that wherever we go. So going into the cost savings about partnering is really, really, really important if we want to deliver the same quality of training and service wherever we go. Now, the other thing is that until we grow to where there's a sufficient business, let's say, for example, on Guam by itself, and that there's some particular challenges that we can talk about later. What we do is we have three instructors that we hire that are Guam based, but we send our office staff, one office staff, down to run the course when it happens. Now, at some point, there will be a critical mass of students where we can hire locally on Guam, and then we will do that. But we're not in a place to do that quite yet. But hopefully, we will be soon. Anyway,
Understood.
going to your other question. Um, so I'd like to break down our audience into three very broad categories. One is the high school student here on the CNMI, it's through PSS. On Guam, it will be DOE when the funding can be sorted out. The second
Okay.
is with Department of Labor, and here on the CNMI, it is the Workforce Investment Agency office, and down on Guam, it's the American Jobs Center. What is it called? American Job Center, American Jobs,
Placement Center, I think.
something like that, right? But
Yeah.
it's the same
But
function,
still
basically
under Dave De Solo.
under DOL, and it's still
Yeah.
the same thing. Now, we ran our first cohort of training on Guam with CTA Trades last year. We ran a second cohort that was specifically targeted to individuals who needed to do some refresher training, and one of our instructors that we needed to get some revalidation training for, and then we ran our first cohort with DOL Guam in January, and that was really successful, and we really liked it. So going back, three separate audiences. The first is high schoolers, the second is Department of Labor, and the third is people who are already in the industry who are looking to either upgrade their credentials, their Merchant Mariner credentials, or to do revalidation training or something like that. Now, very surprisingly to us, what we found is that we are drawing people from the Philippines, from American citizens with U.S. credentials from the Philippines, Japan, Vietnam, um, and maybe a few other countries that I don't necessarily remember. And
Interesting.
for sure, Guam. So Guam has military Seal of Command that hires a lot of mariners that are home based there, and then Guam also has Cabras. So
Right.
we've had a number of people from let's say we call them from the public, who've come to us there. But that's a very, very small part of our business. I would say probably less than about 5%. It's looking like the high school and the DOL is roughly about 50-50. In high school, the limit for age is 16. Coast Guard does not issue a credential for anybody under the age of 16. And for the Department of Labor, the age range has been from just having graduated from high school all the way to up into the 60s. So it's a broad range.
Mm,
If I had to say an average, I would say maybe 20s, 30s, something like that for the DOL
okay.
audience, right? And I would expect that to be about the same no matter where we go. Now,
Okay.
with Department of Education on Guam, and I just want to be very clear that I'm not um, saying anything negative about the Department of Education, okay, the Guam Department of Education, but we had submitted a um, a pilot program proposal. We answered a pilot program proposal for last year that was supposed to train 12 students in the Simon Sanchez and what is it, the there are two schools that are together in a high school. What is it? John F. Kennedy, JFK High School? Yeah.
Yeah, JFK and Simon
And Simon Sanchez.
Sanchez.
And they are together in the same high school. I think they've divided morning and evening or something. Anyway, we were
Right.
supposed to run a cohort of 12, six for Simon Sanchez, six for JFK this year. And that never happened because our proposal was submitted in July, immediately after we received it. And all the way up until January, we were being told that it was just stuck in procurement, stuck in procurement. This seems to be a common theme on Guam, stuck in procurement, stuck with the AG's office, stuck someplace. And what
Yes.
we learned was that, in fact, that RFP was canceled all the way in 2 weeks after it was submitted. So we submitted end of July and it was canceled middle of August. And the reason it was canceled was simply because Maritime was not um, defined in the uh, special grant that funded CT type work. There's a name for that grant, and I don't have it on my brain. So we've approached the new leadership, and there's a lot of excitement, and our job is to follow up with leadership to make sure that maritime is specifically identified in the new grant, which then starts for next year. So the current grant is a 3-year grant,
That's
ends March 31st, and then there's a new one, and we just have to make sure that maritime is specifically mentioned so that we can offer these services to the young people on Guam. And it's particularly important on Guam, in as much as it's important here on Saipan, because the common theme is two things. One, nothing for our kids to do but join the military. Two, the brain drain. How many times have
yep,
we heard that, right? And the
yes,
beautiful thing about being a mariner is that you go off onto a ship for 30 days or 4 months or whatever it is, and you come home to Guam. You come home to CNMI, and
right,
all of the folks that we have put into industry or helped find a home in the maritime industry take advantage of all of the benefits that exists about calling Guam or CNMI your resident. And I can enumerate those. Number one, your home is where you lay your head, right? And when you're on a ship, your head is in somewhere on the high seas. It doesn't matter. But you come home. That's number one. Number two, and this is what young people really don't think about, but people your age and my age do think about, and that is the grand theft of the federal government into our pockets, right? And we are shielded from waste, fraud, and abuse. That's a political discussion by only paying taxes locally and being exempt from federal taxes. So by virtue of living in the CNMI or on Guam, you are saving automatically somewhere between 25 and 40% of your hard work. It stays in your pocket. You support local government. Always you have to pay the tax man, but you're not paying some unknown someplace far, far away for money that you don't know where it's going to go to because you're exempt from federal taxes. Okay.
right.
That is the thing that is so important and what we really, really emphasize to our people. It doesn't matter. You can be on an MSC ship out in Norfolk for the rest of your career and still call Saipan or Guam home and pay your taxes accordingly, as long as you pay your taxes, right? So that's a very important thing about being
Yeah,
a local parent.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, um, WPMA emphasizes credential job relevant training. All right. So, what are the core courses, curriculum, and or certifications that you focus on first, and why those?
Yes, there's a lot wrapped up into that question, and I'm going to sort of try to peel the onion back. In order, well, let me first start with the merchant mariner credential. It's kind of like flying an airplane. You have to start with a license. It's kind of like driving a car. You have to start with a license, right? And that license in the maritime world is called a merchant mariner credential. Now, that merchant mariner credential is, I don't want to say it's useless by itself, but it's almost useless except for if you're working if you're only working locally. So as an example, you can go get a merchant mariner credential and work as a deckhand at with Cabris or with a fishing charter captain or with a dive a dive boat or something like that, or some kind of a tourism boat. In fact, you can work on the Chapter T vessels, the small boats, even without a merchant mariner credential, because the only person that's required to be credentialed is the skipper, the captain, right? But every captain knows that they would rather have somebody with a red book with a merchant mariner credential than with not. Now, that's the starting point. Getting a merchant mariner credential is not for the faint of heart. I'm going to give you a sea story. We have done a lot of volunteer work with an outfit called the United States Naval Sea Cadets. And
Ah, yeah,
you're familiar, Larry Lim Tiaco, and a fellow that just passed away. Can't remember his name right now. was very much involved in Sea Cadets on Guam. And we started Sea Cadets here on Saipan in 2022 or something like that, um, intended to be sort of like the youth program arm of the academy because we wanted to reach the audience. Well, it didn't work out. But I also, as part of that, courted the leadership, Admiral Lennon of United States Naval Sea Cadets, and said, "Hey, listen, we have something here that we can, offer these whatever online um, things to help kids learn how to get a Merchant Mariner credential and get a start." And he said, "Well, how hard can that be?" And I said, "Okay, Admiral, you're a big guy, go get one." And at the end of the day, he had to get on the phone and say, "Hey, Mike, I'm stuck." Right. So if the Admiral can't figure it out, then how should we expect a young 18-year-old or 19-year-old to sort through quite a convoluted process to getting the Merchant Mariner credential. Okay, so back into your question. We package together something called basic training. We call it the entry level Mariner program. And the entry level Mariner program, which is our number one seller, you could say our number one thing that we do, is a Merchant Mariner credential, which we manage 100% for the candidate, understanding that it's difficult. Then they go through 7 days of training, one day of which is something called Vessel Personnel with Designated Security Duties. So that's a vessel security course. And the other
Right.
4 courses of which is something called basic training. Now, does a mariner who's working on Cabras on the tugboats need basic training? No, they don't. Why? Because Coast Guard regards working on the tugs in the harbor as being near coastal or inland, right? That's how they rate. Even though technically, Guam and the CNMI are not categorized as inland under the law. Coast Guard treats those waters as inland, and so you can actually go to work for Cabras only with a Merchant Mariner credential and no training. Okay.
Right.
However, what we sell, we sell dreams, and the dream that we sell is working on a big ship making $68,000 a month, and and there's challenges that we'll talk about later in the podcast about that. And for that, because you're now trading internationally, you have to have these other trainings. Now, both VPDSD and basic training are considered STCW courses. STCW is an acronym that stands for Standards of Training Certification Watchkeeping, and that is built to an international standard. So the details beyond that really don't matter. So that's what we sell, basic training and VPDSD. Basic training is made up of 4 courses, which altogether are called basic training. They are basic firefighting, number 1, personal survival techniques, number 2, first aid CPR, number 3, and personal safety and social responsibility, number 4. Actually, the last one is really the foundational course that we teach first. So those 4 courses together, package, send them to Coast Guard, you come back with basic training in your Merchant Mariner credential.
And
That's
how
what we
long does it
start out.
take to go through that series of 4 courses?
Well, Robert, a long time. If you can handle 7 days, then you can get through it. So it's 7 days, right? So
All right.
7 days will earn you the privilege of being able to work on a big ship in an entry level rating, and that's it.
All right.
Now, the Merchant Mariner credential, it is kind of a little bit complicated. There's a lot of components to it, and it takes, well, you could do it in a few weeks, but it takes most people about 6 or between 2 and 3 months to do.
Okay.
Components of the Merchant Mariner credential, there's that question somewhere else, but we may as well touch on it now, are a drug test. So you have to be drug free. It's a federal license. They are a medical examination, which is not a very deep examination. There is the Transportation Workers Identification, otherwise known as TWIC card. And there's
The TWIC cards.
and there's the gathering of, for the kids, they have to parents have to write an affidavit and get it notarized that their kid is authorized to hold a merchant mariner credential, and then there's the gathering of some documents and then pulling them all together and uploading them onto the NMC website. So sounds easy, but learning or doing is daunting, and that's why we include that step as a foundational part of our entry-level mariner program.
Okay. And you had touched on this already about kind of what industries and what companies are pulling your graduates. So military sea lift command, Cabras, um, what are some of the others?
Right. So we categorize, there's another question in here, so we may as well just kind of go down that rabbit hole. We categorize employment in maybe three different categories. The first is local, or you could say regional employment, right? So the two main employers in broad categorization are are the professionals and then tourism, right? So folks like Cabras, folks like Sacman Logistics are the two main players in the either local or inter-island game, and both of them compete, or I don't want to say
Say
compete.
that
Both of
again.
them. So the two, so for regional, for
Two
local
or
work,
who?
yeah, for local work we categorize for the professional companies and for tourism. So let's talk about the professional companies. The first is Cabras, and the second is Sacman Logistics. Sacman Logistics is headquartered out of Saipan and manages a lot of the inter-island trade with Matson and Cabras. And the second one is Cabras, and Cabras has a lock on all of the tugboats here on in the CNMI and on Guam. So all of the towing the harbor towing vessels and all of the launch services. So they have here on the CNMI and on Guam. So that's what they do. And there's no other players in that world. They also have the pilots and the pollution prevention company and all the rest of it. And they really do a great job at what they're doing. And they're looking uh, for people, as I understand it. I don't have that anything
Right.
more than just people say. So Sacma Logistics, all of their entry level positions have all been filled by WPMA mariners, and so they're saturated until they either get new companies or grow their people into higher positions where new entry level mariners can go. Okay, and then the other is tourism. So here on Saipan and I think down in Guam, it's pretty much the same. You've got diving, you've got fishing charters, you've got some sailing charters, and then you've got dinner cruises or things kind of sort of like that, and so that's the where people go. Now, I want to emphasize in all of these things, the most important piece of getting a job is building sea time.
Okay.
Because building seat time is what will get you to the point of being able to get to the next level of employment in the maritime world, right? On the on the deck side, it's going to be ordinary seamen, specially trained ordinary seamen, able seamen, and then bosun. On the engine side, it's going to be wiper, and then oiler, and then QMed, and then specialty QMed. So somebody who's a specialty with, I don't know, electrician or AC or something like that. And both of those paths take a long time to build a sea time. And sea time can be gotten by working on the on the fishing boat, or working on the dinner cruise, or working on the whatever the charter boat. Coast Guard does
Right.
not discriminate against sea time. Sea time is sea time. Untying a boat is virtually the same as untying a ship, with the exception that the lines are bigger. Steering a boat and steering a ship are virtually the same, except for you've got a bigger rudder and a lot more length overall that you're dealing with, or length on the waterline that you're dealing with. The engines might be the size of a house instead of the size of of a desk or whatever, right? So
Yes.
so the concept of being getting experience is Coast Guard treats it pretty much all the same. Now, there are some technical distinctions in some ratings that you have to be on so much tonnage or so much horsepower, but in general, sea time is sea time. And so, and so that's really the most important thing in advancing the credential.
Okay. So success stories matter here. What's a graduate success story that captures what WPMA can do? Somebody whose life trajectory, really radically changed and
Yeah.
you kind of hold up as a hallmark.
I think about two people here on the CNMI, and understand that we've been operating here on the CNMI really since what 2023 or so, and we only really opened our doors on Guam, last year. So we've got a lot more history and a lot more people that we've trained in the CNMI, and so therefore we've got a lot more people who've entered the workforce from the CNMI than on Guam. There's two people that I think about. One person is the guy's name is Kenshiro Yanai, and we first met him as maybe a 16-year-old at Kagman High School, and that would have been perhaps 2022 or 2023. And he was he was a kid with hair down to his butt, and uh, destined to a world of of where all the ne'er-do-wells land. I'm trying to be politically correct, right? He was destined into going into a direction I thought that was really no good. So he came to us initially with the Sea Cadets, and then transitioned into WPMA programs. And so he eventually graduated from high school maybe 2 years ago, and then started sailing with a company called Skylar Lines through the union called the Seafarers International Union, and established himself solidly. And I always recognized in Kenshiro the possibility that he could be a ship captain. That is the kind of intelligence, drive, capability, acumen, personality makeup that was a part of this young man. And we have lost track of him, but the last we saw, he was still sailing with Skylar Lines, and going back onto the ships and advancing his credential, and doing great things for him and his family. I remember that
Outstanding. Shout out to him.
yeah, shout out to Kenshiro. Kenshiro, if you ever hear this, touch base with Captain Mike. I want to know where you are. The second person is a guy who came to us through Department of Labor, and he was in our first or maybe second cohort, probably going back to maybe 2000, early 2024. His name is Robert Smith. He's a local,
Good
I think,
first name.
good first name. Yep. Well, that's right. Good, good first name. So he had a very whatever Anglican name, but he's actually full-blooded Chamorro, and he worked very, very hard to get through the program. Maybe you could say, like myself, not the sharpest pencil in the box, but he had drive. He had drive like nobody I've ever seen before, and determination. And those are two of the key components to being successful at anything. It doesn't matter what you pick. If you want to be a pencil sharpener, to be the best one, you have to be determined to be the best one, right? And he had that kind of drive. And so he was our folks who eventually was able to get into Military Seal of Command, which was great. So he got lucky, got into Military Seal of Command, and he has been doing great things in Military Seal of Command. We hear from him all the time. He's very active on our WPMA Mariners chat, which draws from everybody. It's sort of like a depository of everybody that we've touched. And he has promoted our program and built a wonderful career for himself, is making a lot of money, is building a life and doing everything that we envision for our students to do. So shout out to Robert Smith. If you hear this, then reach out and say hi. We're in touch with you a lot.
All
Those
right. Shout out to Robert.
but there's many others, right? But those are the two
Yeah.
that stand out. There's actually a girl, Maria Kalma, who came through our program last year, and she was so also the key is determination. She was so determined that she scraped up money from all little bit pieces of her family, got herself a one-way ticket to San Francisco, and then joined I can't remember which union, either the Sailors Union of the Pacific or the MFOW. Might have been the MFOW, and got a job with them and has been, working her way up. In fact, she was on the same ship as my wife. Oh yeah, my wife is also a mariner. On the USNS Watkins, which was out here in the Saipan anchorage for a number of months last year, and is doing great. It's doing great. So the people who have successfully gotten
Shout out Maria.
into the industry are the people who have had exceptional drive and determinism and just did not look at no or any kind of a barrier as a or not barrier, any kind of a road bump as a barrier to getting to their goals. So shout out to
Right.
those. They've done really, really great.
Right. All right, let's transition to kind of our next segment area, and that's really partnerships in the Guam workforce ecosystem. So you've been building partnerships on Guam. How are you working with Guam Community College, and how does that partnership, uh, what does it look like?
Sure. Well, Dr. Okada and I worked very, very, very hard, as I'm sure she will attest to last year. The goal was to get our programs into their summer camp program last year. Unfortunately, we engaged maybe a little bit too late, and the bureaucratic process, which is not a negative, it's just, everybody wants to dot their I's and cross their T's, went a little bit slower than I personally wanted in order for us to teach at last year's summer camp program. Well, we eventually signed an MOA and celebrated that partnership, and so GCC right now is our primary partner outside of GCA Trades, where we can uh, offer training to the young people. Um, and so Guam Community College, I don't understand, fully, deeply, I should say, not fully, well, fully and deeply, exactly how Community College attracts or is funded by whomever they're funded for to teach CT stuff onto Guam. But there's some kind of a special thing there, and so that is very important. Now, we would reach a similar but not identical audience through GCC as we would with a partnership with DOE. And hopefully, if everything goes right, we'll have a partnership with DOE, Guam DOE, and a partnership with GCC. Now, with GCC, we're looking ahead to the summer camp program of this year, and that summer camp program is still tied up in the AG's office. So if that can break loose soon enough, then Guam Community College and us, by virtue of being a vendor to Guam Community College, can offer our training onto to the Guam youth, and it's specifically
Okay.
to Guam youth, but because it's tied to high schoolers and people who've just graduated from high school. So again, things completely out of our control, and I dare say out of Guam Community College's control. I know that Dr. Tadella and Dr. Okada are working very, very hard to try to get the AG's office to, I don't know what the word is, unclog or pass or get through the system, that particular funding. But when that happens, then we'll be able to get to work on planning. And meanwhile, we're just in a holding pattern. The other, we've already talked about the GDOE partnership and the challenges there. We have to follow up on the great people working at the leadership of DOE to make sure that Maritime is identified specifically in the next grant period, or
Right.
grant for the next grant period. And then the other partner is University of Guam. So we've engaged with University of Guam a year ago, and we do need to follow up with the University of Guam. Um, and and the interest there is for us is and we might be able to get some of this through GCC as well, is having a partner with whom we can gain access to Pell Grant and other funding. This is really, really important to our strategic growth, and why we court universities and community colleges, because there is there's no maritime school that is accredited, with the exception of the maritime colleges, right? And they have to be accredited because they're a college, not because they're a maritime school. Our accreditation principally comes from U.S. Coast Guard, but Coast Guard is not recognized as a official accreditation society, so to speak, in the same way that accreditation societies are out there accrediting colleges and universities. Now, that is very important. The other piece of that for us is that we're actually pursuing our own accreditation through a accreditation society called COE. I don't remember off the top what that stands for. Anybody can Google it, but they specialize in accrediting trade schools, and
Okay.
so they're perfectly suited for us, because in the umbrella of schools, we are considered a CTE school. We're a continuing professional training type of a school, CTE, training education, right? So career technical education, that's what we do. That's what we are.
Yeah. All right. So you talked about, I think, hit upon all of your main players: GCA Trades Academy, GCC, um, UOG, which you're working with the Guam Department of Education, and of course Guam Department of Labor under their program. Is there any other partner out there that you're working with?
Well, we ran a cohort with Will Castro and Career Tech Academy down in Agate last year, and we haven't been able to pursue that simply because of, money's tight, and um, and and the opportunities to for those kids. I mean, remember, CTA is a private school. It's a charter school, really, but it
Right.
falls, in my mind, in the same category as private schools, charter schools. They share public funding to some extent, um, but they're not schools that have very deep pockets, I guess, right? And but what school does, right? So so Will and I basically have kind of agreed that the students and there's many students at CTA that are interested in the Maritimes, that they would be better placed through the Guam Community College summer camp program. It's the
Okay.
same, it's the same set of courses, the same outcomes, but it, doesn't come out of CTA pockets, and they've got other ways that they can meaningfully use their funds, right? So this is
Okay.
why, AG of Guam, let's get that thing passed through.
Yeah.
If you're
Yeah. It's
listening.
look. It sounds like you're hitting all of the right players to build this workforce development CTE kind of ecosystem in order to create that pipeline. And it's so great. Just a thought here. Has there been any thought in not just going down the pipeline for producing mariners, but what about like maintainers and ship repair kind of people? Have there been any thought of taking on that side of the equation as well?
Well, interestingly that you mentioned that, because Guam Shipyard recently put out an inquiry to us to have some of their folks train in a very narrow sector of the training that we do, which is basic firefighting. So why is basic
Mm,
firefighting important to whatever a ship repair yard? Well, it's important because one of the major sources of fires on a ship, and we know this, anecdotally and historically, is through welding in shipyards. And so if you have
Yep.
a higher trained workforce that can be self-sufficient while they're doing their welding or training, then you've got a safer overall working environment. We can't
Yes.
forget the Navy lost a multi-billion-dollar platform just a couple years ago due to a fire that started because of welding. So, I mean, it's a very complicated story. There's a lot of things that went wrong in their Swiss cheese analysis of the investigation, but ultimately, fires on ships start in four places: engine room with fuel, galley with cooking stuff, fats, whatever, deep fryers, laundry through laundry fires, and fires that are started because of welding and inadequate controls for welding with fire watches or lookouts or something like that. So that's great. Now, GCA Trades already plays very strongly in supporting Guam Shipyard, and I think probably also Cabris in their ship repair
Right.
uh, world. Through training welders and
Yeah.
other things. I think that there's a tremendous opportunity for that, and I've talked to Dr. Burt a number of times to expand his curriculum. By the way, also Jolina Tao here with NM Tech, where we're housed, and on Saipan, to expand their welding programs to include American Bureau of Shipping welding standards. And the reason that's
Yes.
important,
Yes.
yeah, the reason
Yes.
that's important is because whatever the standards are not good enough for welding on a ship. And
Correct. It's construction. It's NCCER standards, which is
right.
different from what you quoted.
Well, actually, truth be told, the standards are, I don't want to say they're identical, but they're sufficiently the same to not be materially different. What is different is that the stamp that goes onto the piece of paper that certifies
Right.
the welder, that's really what's different. And for the trainer,
Right.
it's the cost of that certification. So ABS is not known to be cheap, and that's really what keeps the NM Techs and the GCA Trades of the world out of teaching ABS. I've had many conversations with Jolene and Dr. Bird about this, but we don't
Okay.
control it.
Yeah.
And because, to answer your question more directly, because being a shipyard worker does not require a merchant mariner credential, it therefore does not behoove the investment of the employer to invest in that. If they invest in that, now they're risking the investment of the loss of education to that employer for wanting to, go to sea and do the same thing, maybe at more money. So now another very important part of ship repair is if you look at the strategic the strategic gaps that are identified by the administration's executive order and the subsequent uh, mapping of
Maritime Action Plan.
mapping of the Maritime Action Plan is that
Yeah.
ship repair is a big part of that. Now, I have not
Right.
read that document front to back. There's a lot of material there, but I have read the executive order front to back, and and ship repair, in as much as having bottoms to carry goods, is a strategic factor. And frankly,
Yes.
everybody in ship repair is your age and my age, and we're checking out in the next 5 to 10 years, right? And so even
Yes.
now, all of the ship repair companies, Hawaii, I've talked to the people there, uh, Ingalls Shipbuilding, um, Bath Iron Works, you
Yes.
know, all of these ship repair companies uh, are really, really hurting for welders and fitters and plumbers and all this other stuff. There's just not enough of them, and they're paying people right out of the gate, 60, 70, 80, $100 an hour to be a trainee. It's just outrageous what these guys are earning now because the market demands it. So it's crazy what the numbers are. But yeah, there's a huge if you can't build ships, you can't carry cargo, then as a maritime nation, you're nothing.
That's right. That's right.
And that
All
segues
right.
into
So
another one of your questions.
yeah, so that's a great segue into kind of another. segment area, and that's kind of zooming out to kind of the geostrategic context area, right? So, how do you describe the Western Pacific's role as a bridge between Asia and America, and why maritime is a connective tissue? You started hitting right upon that, but go ahead.
Well, I looked at that particular question long and hard, and I think the focus of that particular question is actually misplaced because it's not a regional issue at all. It's directly a national issue. It could be a regional issue if the leadership of Guam and the CNMI somehow took the bull by the horns and made Guam and the CNMI the next Singapore of the world. But I just
Yes,
I just don't see that because I don't see the vision expressed anywhere that if you're gonna accomplish a task, you gotta have a vision first. And that vision has never been expressed, except for inside of my own brain, right?
mm,
I have been very vocal with the CNMI leadership as an example, the administration or people in the administration that there's a jewel here waiting to be harvested, and there's a jewel on Guam waiting to be harvested. I mean,
yes,
you've got literally the
yes,
last harbor, U.S. harbor of refuge that is of any consequence that could manage a significant portion of ship repair. Just as an example, you also have
yes,
a huge naval base that has no shortage of accommodations that can be can handle forward deployed stuff and would play very important roles in war plans. So the history of ship repair in Guam is actually very, very rich. So going back to World War II, ship repair was number one was Hawaii, and then when Hawaii was largely disabled, it was Guam, and then up until a decade ago, with Guam Shipyard in their partnership with the naval base, they had a sizable loading dry dock which could handle virtually anything that military SEAL Commander U.S. Navy has. So they did multiple very large um, jobs on Guam, and
right,
unfortunately for for everybody, the dry dock, something went wrong and it sunk and it broke and it got hauled out, and it is sitting in China right now, already refurbished, ready to come back, but nobody has the vision, not MSC, not industry, not the leadership of Guam. Nobody's got the vision to bring that dry dock, which has been repaired and is fully ready to go, back onto Guam and make Guam the center of ship repair regionally again. Nobody's got that vision.
yes,
Now, there is a company
yes,
in Singapore that is, I've heard or I've read, has an interest in rebuilding ship repair here on Guam, but it's a foreign
yes,
company. Guam Shipyard is a U.S. company, right?
right,
And not only that, but you've got a full warehouse of ship repair equipment, and I'm talking about lathes and stuff the size of your house. That is, I don't want to say ready to go. It's all got to be refurbished because it's been sitting idle for 10 or 15 years. But the infrastructure is here. Why is nobody taking the bull by the horn, bull by the horns and making it happen? Well, because the vision doesn't exist, or maybe it's politics, or maybe it's bad feelings from years ago, or who knows what. But the hatchet needs to be buried, and that big blue dry dock needs to
dry
come back to
dock, yeah,
Guam, and 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 Matt Pothan needs to be allowed to reestablish business so that the Navy and MSC and the world can get on with shipbuilding, ship repair back here on Guam. Who's powerless? Who's got the power to do that? Well, people a lot higher than me, and my brain and my lifespan is not ever long enough to tackle these big issues, you know. So
Yeah, that's a great overview of kind of the geostrategic importance and possibilities that remain out there. So let's now dive down into the workforce piece of that, because obviously it's not just bringing the big blue dry dock back, but you also got to have naval architects, you got to have engineers. I mean, it takes a lot of brain power and effort to keep a dry dock up and running and usable and stuff like that. So how do we produce the kind of the workforce pipeline to make sure that we can be the center of um, ship repair out here in the Western Pacific again?
you remember that great movie from a long time ago, maybe 25 years ago, it's called Field of Dreams,
Yes, if you
right?
build it, they will come.
You build it, they will come. So you know, the economy in general, and on a macro sense, is very much like that. If you create if you create the pathway to success and the infrastructure is then installed, and you pay people enough money, you know, the economy of it will just fall into place. People will gravitate, just like rainwater flows downhill into the aquifer, people will gravitate to the place where they're drawn to the most, right? So, so that's the answer to that. There's you know, the federal pockets are very deep, and I'm not suggesting that, you know, we fleece them. We absolutely should be very judicious with how we spend federal dollars, but the point here is that to set up Guam as a center of shipbuilding, let's say, or ship repair, let's say, beyond Hawaii, you have to have the base. You have to have the base of it, and the base of it is the infrastructure. What I do want to
Yeah.
do, Robert, is actually take this conversation, if you don't mind me, you know, being the captain and taking the lead on something, is taking this
You are the
conversation
captain.
really really to what I think is fundamentally much more important, and that is you've heard me say over and over again that this is really not a regional thing. This is a national thing. This is a national thing. WPMA is playing in a regional stage, but answering a national need, right? We're just
Mm,
doing it with local people. And so
yes.
when you look at the, you know, the umbrella of powerful nations, there's one thing that's in common with all powerhouses. You look at
Seafaring
the
maritime capability.
exactly. You can look at the Phoenicians, you can look at the Vikings, you can look at the ancient Greeks and the Romans and the Egyptians and more recently to the, you know, in the 16 and 1700s with the British Empire and the Italians and the Portuguese and the Spanish. What is one thing that all of these powerhouses had in common? They had a huge, enormous, worldwide, strong maritime presence. Maritime presence comes into two principal categories: the might of the maritime, meaning the navy, and the might of carrying the trade, which is merchant shipping, right? And they have to be together. Now, we can see in current events with this administration's work in the Middle East with the IRGC. Bar none, the U.S. military or the U.S. Navy's might is the best in the world. It's the strongest, the
Yes.
most capable, has the farthest outreach, can respond the quickest, all of those strategic international implications, right? What are we missing? We're missing the ability to um, to support trade, and that puts the United States at a very large disadvantage. Why?
Yes.
Because if the other maritime countries of the world decided to switch off trade with their ships, meaning the Maersk's of the world, the CGM, CMAs of the world, basically the Europeans and the Chinese, the MSCs of the world, by the way, MSC meaning Mediterranean Shipping Company, not not military SEAL Command, the 3 or 4 big players, if they switched off trade to the U.S. would collapse in a matter of weeks. And so this is one of the very, very important underpinnings of this administration's effort is to rebuild shipping. In other words, make American merchant marine great again, let's say. And
Yep.
I know that's a political mantra, but make American shipping great, right? Let's become the largest in the world again. Make it easy for U.S. companies to navigate the hurdles of regulation and so on, right? Make it easy for them. Uh, Give them incentives to flag their bottoms under the U.S. flag. Here's a little statistic that many people don't know. About 60% of the world bottoms, by that I mean not bikinis, but the hulls that are floating around the world, are owned by U.S. dollars, right? Companies that exist in New York City that are worldwide companies that have maybe a handful of ships under the U.S. flag, and the rest of the fleet is foreign flag because of regulation and costs and so on, labor costs being a big part of them. If we incentivized, or if the administration is incentivized, bringing merchant ships all over the world back under the U.S. flag, then all of a sudden we would have a powerhouse in maritime strength. And that
Because you're
is,
saying that they're already owned dollar wise by the US. It's just a matter of bringing it back home and having the infrastructure and the ecosystem to support that and continue to grow that.
yep, just reflag US. Find a way to do
Yeah.
it.
Uh, how do we communicate that message, particularly from like the local level, Guam CNMI, to the national level, to understand some investments out here to help build that ecosystem and whatnot is not just a nice and good thing for Guam, but like you said, it's a national level priority and interest kind of thing. What's the best way to kind of carry that message to the national level to get
Yeah.
them to see investment in Guam and CNMI and out here as a strategic importance in their best interest.
Yeah. Well, I think the current administration's vision is already fairly well outlined in the executive order and
And the
subsequent,
map,
yeah, and in the
yeah,
map, right? So the vision is there. So we're not talking about the vision. The vision is 100% there. What we're talking about is all the things that would make that vision possible, and predominantly is making it financially attractive for investment to bring U.S. owned foreign flagged ships back under the U.S. flag. And it can be done. I'm not a ship owner. I've never been in that world. I've just been an ordinary seaman, sitting in the captain's chair on ships, you could say, right? But it seems to me that it's fairly easy. All you have to do is incentivize companies to do that. So how do you do that? Well, you look at what the fixed costs are and what the variable costs are. Can you do anything about the cost of maritime labor in the U.S.? No, that's pretty much fixed, right? By the way, cost of maritime labor internationally there's quite a big range, but in general, European shipping companies that are flagged European and U.S. flagged and Korean flagged and Japanese flagged are pretty much on par. It used to be that they were not, but now they are. So a European mariner is going to be making more or less the equivalent of a U.S. mariner. The same for Korea, the same for Japan. What's different is the flags of convenience. So the Filipino mariners, who are arguably some of the best mariners in the world, the Indonesian mariners, the Ukrainian mariners, who are working on foreign flags for a lot less money, simply because their economies support that reduced wage, being a developing or an underdeveloped or developing country. That's where the disparity is. Now, that's a fixed cost. You can't do anything about that. What can you do? Well, the cost of regulation, right? The
yes,
cost of taxes. If you
Yes.
if you waive shipping companies, if you waive shipping companies 100% of tax on their profits or reduced it to something very, very low, then all of a sudden everybody's going to flock their fleets into under the U.S. flag, right?
And
Now,
that's where capital is going to want to go from the private sector, from the private equity markets, et cetera, because that's going to be seen as a good deal and that's going to drive the capital infusion that's needed
exactly. Where does water flow?
downhill. Yeah.
Downhill. It goes on the easiest path. The river flows on the easiest path that it's going to find its way to the sea, right? You know that, and everybody knows that as the individual. Now, if you're living in the States, you can go to Aldi and buy a basket full of groceries for $100, or you can go to Giant or Safeway or someplace else and buy that same basket of groceries for $150. Where are you going to go? You're going to go to Aldi, right? Or you're going to go to the local Chinese market here on Saipan or Guam or wherever, where groceries are substantially more affordable than it's the same thing, but on a much bigger scale, right?
Yeah.
If I were king for a day, and you heard me say this before, there's a tremendous, and it's just vision, Robert. It's just vision. The
Yes.
potential for Guam and or the CNMI to become a U.S. flag of convenience simply because of the tax structure is ginormous. If the Crowleys of the world or the Matsons of the world recognized that there was a way for them to set up in a free trade zone here in the CNMI, which exists, there's 30 acres down by the airport, or Guam, and there's no reason
Or
why
now new in the map, these new maritime prosperity zones
zones,
that
right?
people can now set up and uh, get designated by the Department of Commerce.
Exactly. But specifically to the CNMI in Guam, if if the local governments attracted or established a framework for which the maritime powerhouses in the US, and I'm thinking Matson, APL, Crowley, and there's a number of others, right? To set up shop here on the CNMI on Guam, where they're hardly paying any taxes, that would be a huge benefit. So virtually the CNMI or Guam could then become the U.S. flag of convenience, still under the U.S. flag, but structured in such a way that it's they're here. That's going to
Yes,
bring headquarters right here or right to Guam. That's going to bring all of the a lot of stuff, the logistics, the computer people, all of that stuff that requires the underpinnings of the headquarters of a company to be to be right here. And that all of a sudden is going to attract a lot of other business. I'm going to give you just a quick example with a company called Transocean that I worked for many years. Transocean was a company that was headquartered in Houston. Their official headquarters in, I don't know, 2008 or 10 or something like that, shifted from Houston to Switzerland. It became a Swiss company. Simply, they
because
exported
of
their
tax.
headquarters simply
Yeah,
because of the tax structure, right? And
yeah,
and if we could convince, you know, Transocean that we're cheaper than Switzerland, then it would take about 2 seconds for them to evaluate that and send everybody out here and build a big new building and whatnot. Because these are companies
yes.
with hugely deep pockets. Anyway, but I'm not king for a day, Robert. I'm just an ordinary seaman.
Yeah, but I love it. This was a great conversation. And I'm glad that we got to this place because it really does need conversation and a vision and backed up by action between the local level all the way up to the national. It's not just a good or nice to have here locally because we want it or it'll help us out. It's making the national level understand that it's in your best interest to help make these things possible here.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. I wanna, if you allow, I know that we're almost into 2 hours of this podcast, but if you allow, I want to touch on a very, very important point about the work that we're doing, and it touches on vision also. Do I have your
go
permission
ahead.
to do that? Okay. So
Go
the
ahead, and then
biggest
we'll go ahead and wrap it up.
wrap it up. The biggest challenge that we have in placing people in the workforce is the barrier of people being able to enter into the entry level jobs. I've mentioned that a number of times before. Why is
Hmm.
that? The reason is because is because military SEAL of Command right now is not hiring at the entry level. They are instead hiring or putting a lot of resources into hiring where the jobs are needed, which is the higher level ABs and QMEDs and so on, right? The problem is that they don't exist out there because everybody's clamoring for the same group of people, right? So
Yeah.
so that same stress in the industry is found with the tugboat outfits. Oh, we don't have enough ABs or engineers. That's found in the unions. Oh, we don't have enough ABs or engineers. That's found all through industry. And the reason is uh, quite complicated. Uh, but there's several reasons for this. Number one, um, ships don't have a lot of entry level positions available, right? Number one. That is a problem between industry and Coast Guard, which is regulatory. Industry has allowed, regulatory Coast Guard has allowed industry to push for minimum crews to the point where the crews are virtually like barely enough to keep a ship going, and the first jobs to go are the entry-level mariners because Coast Guard is going to say, "Oh, we want the most qualified people on the ship," right? So that's number one reason. Number two reason, the largest union in the country is the Seafarers International Union, and they have their own very robust um, apprenticeship program. It's the word apprenticeship in the DOL language is a bit of a misnomer. So let's call it a trainee program. And they use all of the ships that are contracted with their company, and they fill these entry-level positions with their trainees first, right? So therefore, you can't. It's very hard to join the union as an entry-level mariner because you're going to have to come in the traditional way, and the jobs are not available. So we talked about three reasons: limitations, military SEAL of Command, unions have a lock on entry-level jobs, and the biggest challenge, which is really something that I can't control, nobody can control, and that is that Coast Guard has allowed industry to reduce crew sizes so that entry-level positions are not there. Now, what's our vision at WPMA? So we are very, very actively pursuing a concept which is a training vessel concept where we can partner with industry and we can partner with unions and we can partner with maritime schools all over the country to try to
Mm.
share these beds and find somebody with deeper pockets to say, hey, this is a great idea. This is a vessel capable of dual function that will, let's say, for example, a research vessel or something that will minimize the the cost of carrying trainees and maximize the ability to get these trainees up at a higher at a higher rating quicker. How is that done? Well, that's done with sanctioned programs, which Coast Guard allows. Coast Guard approves curriculum, they approve programs where you can condense, let's say, 3 years of life or let's say 1.5 years of sea time down to a few months if you do it in a concentrated, organized way. That's what we're working on. And we're the only maritime school that is really working at a national strategic level. We're going to be presenting, we talked about this a little bit at the ACT, but we're going to be presenting at a forum in Baltimore at the end of this month, and then we've got some meetings lined up with the workforce people at Merit, and hopefully we can get in with Military SEAL of Command because another
Yeah.
way to do this is just to build a business case that we can train ABs and QMEDs and get them into the workforce where they're needed.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we're selling honestly like almost a lie. Well, we're not, but we're finding that getting people into the workforce is really, really hard in a kind of a way that we've saturated the workforce. So this little company in Saipan and Guam has saturated the national workforce with entry-level mariners. There's no more of them, no more positions available. And this is a real big disappointment, but there's a path forward. And this path forward is with this multi-purpose um, training vessel. I've written a white paper on it. I'm circulating right now, and hopefully there's some open ears within industry and fellow schools that all can take advantage of the beds available on a prospective training vessel. That is the solution that industry needs. And guess what? The challenge is only going to get worse because
Yes.
50%, there's a projection out there that 50, and it's based on a survey, that 50% of U.S. mariners are going to exit the workforce in the next 5 years. So if MSC does not say, hey, listen, we're going to invest in entry-level mariners today and open the doors, then their problem is going to get worse tomorrow. So it takes vision and a look ahead by everybody to say, okay, let's sacrifice today's dollar so that we're not in a pinch tomorrow. Because the only two ways to get to an advanced rating is A, through a sanctioned program in a training vessel, which does not exist, and WPMA is the only company that's really seriously looking at that. And two, we're going to sacrifice money today to bring in entry-level mariners so that tomorrow we're not going to be in yet another shortage of mariners tomorrow, 5 years down the road, because the problem is going to get worse. All right, so I'll close with my
That's
stump on that. But that's
that's
the
great
vision.
innovative thinking about trying to head off and deal with uh, a coming problem that you know is coming at you. You
It's
see
coming.
the cliff there. Let's
Yeah,
do something about it.
let's do something about it today. So, to anybody who's listening to this, we have perspective plans and options in place. We're going to circulate those wide as soon as my board approves of this white paper. There's still quite a bit more work to be done on it, um, but
That's
and the other thing is going to take it's going to take industry, it's going to take other schools, and it's going to take government to pull it off the ground, right? We can't do it by ourselves. Our pockets are not deep enough. Or it's going to take somebody that shares my vision and has deep pockets, says, go for it there, Cap Mike. But those people don't really exist unless they believe in it. So
Yeah, yeah. So that was great. So, Kevin Bacher, if there's people out there who are interested in contacting you or hearing more or finding out more about Western Pacific Maritime Academy, how can they get in contact with you or with the school?
yeah. So you can navigate, there's a couple of ways to do this. We have an email address called info at WPMA.net. We were very strategic in finding the shortest doggone email that we could find because nobody likes emails that are, more than 20 words or 10 letters long. So it's a very easy email. That was intentional. If you send an email to me, that's the surest way to have nothing happen to it because I'm so busy on higher strategic goals and challenges that my board has given me. So info at WPMA.net, we have an outstanding staff who will take care of you right away. The second thing is, if you're on Guam and you're interested in this field of work, maritime workforce, march yourself down to the GCIC building, third floor, and knock on the doors of American Job Center and start with an application with them, or email to us, or get on our website and go to the contact us field where you can get a hold of us. It all kind of goes to the same thing. Get your application in the pipeline. As soon as American Job Center gives us enough approved people, we will start another cohort. We had a cohort scheduled for April, but we're gonna have to delay that because there's not enough approved people. There's a lot of people that have applied but not approved. So it takes a
Okay,
while for all that to happen. Yeah, so that's the best thing to do. Navigate our website, which is a bit outdated already. Where that's another one of my projects that I'm tasked with. Website has not grown with us. We've grown much faster than website, so we got to get that updated. But that's the best way to get a hold of us. If you want to call me directly, my number is 670-789-1636. And my personal email, my business email is mbacher, MBACHER at WPMA.net. But again, the best way to get attention is info at WPMA.net.
Outstanding. Wow. Captain Bacher, thank you for your leadership. Thank you for your service. And thank you for building something real for the Western Pacific. What you're doing with WPMA isn't just training, it's really creating opportunity, building capability, and strengthening the economic and strategic foundation of our region. So, thank you for joining us on the Innovate Guam podcast and helping us see how maritime workforce development connects our youth with opportunity, regional resilience, and the bigger national push to restore America's maritime strength. To my audience, I hope you were inspired and learned something today. I certainly did. Remember to follow me on all social media platforms, including Substack. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe to stay up to date on future episodes. And don't forget to check out my Innovate column in the Pacific Daily News every first and third Friday of the month. See you next time, and remember, whether you're at work, at home, or at play, always innovate. Thank you.